Don't touch that dial. It's time again for The Underdog Show. Our story opens October 3rd, 1964, with the NBC debut of Underdog. This humble and lovable superhero,
You're humble and lovable.
was the third Saturday morning cartoon hit from Total Television, the creators of Tennessee Tuxedo and King Leonardo.
This is the most unheard of thing I've ever heard of.
Little did anyone know that this rhyming beagle
I am not slow. Hip, 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 and away we go.
would go on to not just sell General Mills cereal, but become an American canine icon. Thrilling times lie ahead when we meet this heroic shoeshine boy, top reporter Sweet Polly Purebred, and dastardly villains Riff Raff and Simon Bar Sinister. So there's no need to fear. Underdog is here.
Underdog was created in 1963. It debuted in 1964, and it was the brainchild of Buck Biggers and Chet Stover, and they had a success with Tennessee Tuxedo. The ad agency that they were working with said, hey, come up with another cartoon and make it super, and don't use any frogs.
Not plane, nor bird, nor even frog.
We had never been given a contest challenge before. Everything had just been an assignment, like give us an educational series, give us a this. Instead, this was, we're going to take two series, we're going to put two series on the air next year, and you're getting a crack at one of them. The other team that's getting a crack is Ward and Scott. The best of these series will go on NBC, and the least liked, assuming you're both chosen, will go on ABC. So I said, what kind of series? And Gordon Johnson, who gave me the assignment, said, it just has to be a super series, Buck, that's all, a super series. So we decided we'd do a superhero. We had never done one, never even thought about doing one. But this was the opportunity. It's the only words we had, we do it. And just about 4 days before this, Chet, having been at home at the TV set and watching an episode of I Love Lucy where she portrays Superman, and she was funny as a crutch. So the idea was, first of all, if we're going to do a superhero, we can't do one that's serious. We just couldn't write that. We would be bored to tears in the first place, and we wouldn't probably have done a good job of it. So it had to be funny. And to be funny, one of the simplest ways is to go the opposite way. So if you've got a character that's a muscular superhero, what you take is a 98-pound weakling, and that's the first thing that came to us. It came very, very quickly, that idea. So he'll be a 98-pound weakling with sand kicked in his face. And then we decided we'd even give him poetry to recite.
Say no more. I am not slow. Hip, 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 and away we go.
We had it all, except we didn't have what animal it's going to be. We didn't have what the name would be or the voice would be. And then suddenly, about 2 weeks before we were due to put together some rough board, we saw a movie called Spencer's Mountain, and Wally Cox was in it playing a preacher. And we decided, there's our 98-pound weakling. He's going to be perfect, and he sounds like he's reciting poetry even when he isn't. But then we got to our last meeting before we had to meet with Gordon, and we still didn't have the name, and we didn't have the animal. So we truly felt that we were at a disadvantage. First of all, Ward and Scott had many friends at General Mills. So we were afraid that even if we were better, we'd be worse. So we were afraid we didn't have a chance. And when we couldn't come up with the name, it was quite logical for us to say, boy, when we get out to Minneapolis this time, we're going to be the underdogs. We stopped dead. The air, you could feel it, the word hung there. And that was it. Right away, we knew the name of our character was Underdog, and we, of course, knew he had to be a dog because he couldn't be an elephant.
There were a lot of cartoons like that at the time. You remember you had the whole, like, the Rocky and Bullwinkle thing, where it was funny for kids, but there was obviously adult satirical humor happening at the same time. And Underdog was like that. It was a parody of all the superhero stuff that was huge at the time. So it was very much a cartoon for grown-ups, but it was also cute, and you had Wally Cox, who was very, very famous.
I am a hero who never fails. I can't be bothered with such details.
In those days, I didn't understand the political jokes and the double talk and the jokes. Now I do, and he's fantastic. I mean, this is one of the smartest written shows I ever seen in my life. even better than The Simpsons. Because it was so clever, so well done.
There's no need to fear. Underdog is here.
Well, what good are you, you crackpot?
Underdog is the star of the show. He has an alter ego of Shoeshine Boy, and he jumps into what is now antiquated device, a phone booth, to become Underdog.
Underdog.
He was a spoof from Superman, as you know. So, never fear, Underdog is here. You know, and he went to become like a superdog. But he was the underdog because he was a shiny boy, always kind of humble and all that.
There's no need to fear. Underdog is here.
Underdog is voiced by Wally Cox, who's probably best known today as one of the squares in the Hollywood Squares. He was also Mr. Peepers on a sitcom in the 50s, and he was Hiram Holiday in another sitcom.
Peekaboo.
Wally Cox, Underdog. And, you know, it was years. I was an adult before I knew he did anything else. I mean, he'd been a famous actor on screen. But to me, as a kid, it's like, oh, he's the Underdog guy. I was like, oh, he actually appears on camera. I had no idea. I barely knew that he was anything other than Underdog.
It's just little old me, huh? Underdog.
Wally Cox was in Spencer's Mountain, starring Henry Fonda, and we saw him. When we talked about him, we knew right away that was him. It was just like it was meant to be.
He was a very cerebral, brainy man. Smart as a whip. Quiet, and he wrote his own material, stand-up material. He played the smart supper clubs, and he was brilliant. He was brilliant.
Underdog was not just a voice. He was drawn to look like Wally Cox. Not just a voice, we wanted the person there.
I remember hearing the story when I got older that, well, you know, Wally Cox and Marlon Brando were great friends. And I was like, no, get out of here. And then my parents saying, oh, absolutely. And that apparently it had to do with that Marlon Brando and Wally Cox secretly wished they could have had each other's career. Marlon wanted to play more sensitive types and more comedic roles, and Wally wanted to play a tough guy in a leather jacket on a motorcycle.
Sweet Polly Purebred was Underdog's girlfriend, even though it was never specifically stated in the shows. She worked for a TV station and she was the news reporter, and as such, just like Superman had Lois Lane, she was the reporter always getting in trouble, and Underdog had to go and save her.
I always found it very strange watching Underdog because Sweet Polly Purebred looked like my mother and dressed like my mother and had the same hairdo and of course the same voice. Other than the doggy nose, it was pretty much my mother. If you put a big dog nose on her, she kind of was Sweet Polly Purebred, so that made it kind of bizarre.
Sweet Polly Purebred was voiced by Norma McMillan, and she was also the voice of Casper on the Casper cartoon show. And her daughter is Allison Arngrim, who was on Little House on the Prairie.
Okay, so I went on to play one of the meanest villains in TV history, but long before Nellie Olson, I did like cartoon villains, and you didn't really have big villains in Casper. I mean, you had the Ghostly Trio, but they were just kind of stupid. They were pretty harmless. But yes, on Underdog, you had all that Simon Bar Sinister and Riff Raff, and they were great cinematic villains. I like them.
Simon says, come here.
Norma was a very fine stage actress, very good. She was a sweet woman, a sweet person, and a fine actress, and we're very lucky to have her.
When I turned on the cartoons on Saturday morning in the early 60s, my mother was at least half of them. There's always like 9 people who do all the voices, and you kind of, if you're breaking into voiceover, you need to wait for one of them to die or retire, and it's always the same clique and the same people, and it was true then, and she became one of those people.
We had very little enthusiasm on the part of anybody for having a woman in our cartoon series. All the problems you get into, if you touch the wrong thing, if you push the wrong button, if you do the wrong thing. No. Let's don't open that can of worms. We just felt with Underdog, it was vital that he have someone to whom he could be the ultimate hero and even sing, oh where has my underdog gone? So if we didn't have her, what did we have?
Oh, where has my underdog gone?
It was very much her voice. She could go into that voice at any time. I actually sort of have inherited somewhat too. I mean, you know, where has my underdog gone? It just, like I said, she didn't really put it on.
Oh, where has he gone?
We had a casting call for it, and we had about 5 different scenes for the casting, and Norma was just hands up above everybody else. She was just marvelous, tremendous, and did everything we wanted, could do every kind of voice we wanted, from the scream to the singing to the whatever it was.
Sweet Polly Purebred, she read her lines in Los Angeles, and we did ours in New York. And they put them together, sent them to the artists, the cartoonists, over the border in northern Mexico.
One of the questions she got a lot was, how do you come up with these voices? How do you do them? Did you, study them? Did you decide, well, this is a monkey, this is a raccoon? She always found this hilarious. My mother said, well, she's like, I just talk like that. It is her voice. She had a high voice. But she said, I don't sit down and go, okay, it's a raccoon. What does the raccoon feel and think? She says, I say, is it a boy raccoon or is it a girl raccoon? Is it a little boy or is it a little girl? And it really was as simple as that. And then she was just her. I think that may have given a bizarre realism to it, because she wasn't really going for, I am this other person, or I am a dog, or I am a ball of clay. She was being her. And maybe that's why people got so emotionally attached to these characters, that there was something strangely real about Sweet Polly.
Oh, Underdog, you're wonderful.
Narrator of Underdog was a man named George S. Irving, who is another total television favorite.
One of the city's most humble and lovable characters was Shoeshine Boy.
He had the power and the impact to make a very forceful presentation on his narration to get people excited. You'd say, don't touch that dial, and time again for the Underdog show, and tune in next week for the next episode.
With his mighty atomic breath, Underdog inhaled.
Young people knew my voice. And I would go into Saks Fifth Avenue to buy a necktie, and I'd pick one out and I'd say, I'll take this one. And the guy would say, you're the voice of Underdog. Every place, they knew my voice.
It was a battle of Underdog's atomic breath versus Simon's mighty vacuum gun, and Underdog won.
George could do it all, and never like, yes, I can do this, but I normally should be doing Shakespeare on the stage, but I'll be glad to lower myself and play this comic character here. Nothing like that. He was always proud to be part of the shows, the series, and we were proud to have him.
Simon and his army were defeated. And then once more, everyone could look up and say, it's a plane. It's a bird.
It's a frog.
A frog?
I did the announce.
Humble and lovable characters was...
Tune in next week for another exciting episode.
Finished, sir.
And I would do miscellaneous voices in it, all kinds. I really cannot remember them all.
It's been terrible, Klondike Cat. Savoir-faire has been stealing food everywhere.
George S. Irving did a number of other characters on the Underdog show. He did a villain called Tap Tap the Chiseler, who actually looked just like Underdog, except he had a cigar.
Now to put the next part of my plan into action.
There's the Klondike Cat segment, and he did the voice of Major Minor.
After him, Klondike! Get that mouse!
Klondike Cat was one of the last total television shows created. It has kind of its roots with Jay Ward's Dudley Do-Right in that it's a Canadian Mountie, but in this case, it's a cat chasing after a mouse. And it was basically Total Television's take on the traditional cat and mouse, like Tom and Jerry or Herman and Catnip.
You can make a lot of jokes if you go to a different environment. So we said, what do we got? We decided the North, the snow-covered ice, nothing but white. Of course, it's kind of dull if you start to think about it. White and white and white. We finally got a little tired of it. And General Mills, they bought it even before we had Savoir Faire saying, Savoir Faire is everywhere. These were 4.5-minute episodes. You know, you normally go to see a movie that's an hour and a half long and somebody develops their character in it. Well, you got to do something in 4.5 minutes if you want to develop something. Having something to say, like King Leonardo with his, it's the most unheard of thing I ever heard of. That set him up, that made it right there. And you need something like that. And the trouble is you can't make it too phony to just stick it in there. So it has to be something that can come up. And Klondike's was, I'm going to make mincemeat out of that mouse. His was a very natural line, but Savoir Faire, who was the key to the whole thing, because he was everywhere. Klondike would get him over here and you'd go down here and there he'd be. Because Savoir Faire is everywhere.
Oh, savoir faire is everywhere. Oh, savoir faire is everywhere.
George S. Irving was also the voice of Chief Running Board on Go-Go Gophers. Go-Go Gophers is a story of two Indians, one a chief and one his assistant, and they own this territory. And it's probably not a politically correct thing today, but they brought in Colonel Kit Coyote and Sergeant Oklahoma to basically push the Gopher Indians out of Gopher Gulch. In the initial concept, the characters were a little more savage, but over time it was toned down.
What did he say? Him say, charge!
Go-Go Gophers got so popular that they turned it into its own series, but it started out just as a segment within the other. And, you know, anytime anybody thinks about doing a show that has the Indians winning over the white man, whenever they do that, they always have an extremely serious show. This is serious. You can't kid around about this stuff. So we decided we'd do the most hilarious comedy we could think of, with the Indians winning every time. And they did. The Gopher Indians, the two last Indians left in the gulch. And here comes Teddy Roosevelt's horse to wipe them out. Going to wipe them out, Sergeant. We're going to wipe them out. And he doesn't, because they get him every time.
George S. Irving did the interpretation of Alan Swift as Ruffled Feather. And Alan Swift just did his gobbledygook type language.
Underdog had very exciting plot lines, and I liked that Sweet Polly was, you know, reporter, and she'd get kidnapped, and there were villains.
I'll take care of Underdog.
Alan Swift was a voice artist that worked for a number of years at Total Television. On Underdog, his specialty was the villains, and he did the voices of the two most famous villains, Simon Var Sinister and Riff Raff.
Okay, Underdog. Let's see how you like a little lead from my machine gun.
Riff Raff is not only a take on George Raft, it's also kind of a take on his name, Raft to Raff. George Raft did a lot of gangster films back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
We started out basing our characters on movie stars, movie actors, people you know. If you can really picture them, as we could with movie actors, even if you were going to go away slightly from that later, it was a very great help.
With Riff Raff, you know, the villain, and
you talk like George Raff. I want to tell you something, really a character,
In animation, we use lampoon of the real things. Every time you work in some cartoons, you're having fun. Every character I did it with fun.
Alan, to me, was my first shock. I remember when I guess it was 59, we were first doing the series, and we went up there to cast for voices.
That's it. This is my big chance.
So, who thinks they can do this? And Alan would say, who thinks they can do it? Alan said he could do every boy. We could have just let everybody else go, you know, just Alan will do the show. He wasn't kidding. He could really do them, and he could get them in the shortest time I've ever heard of that he could pick up a voice.
Simon Bar Sinister was a character loosely based on Lionel Barrymore. If you've seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life, he's the bad guy in that movie, and that's what he's imitating to do his character.
Simon Bar Sinister may not look like it to a lot of people. To us, he looks like Lionel Barrymore.
The world of Commander McBragg was basically created out of a need that they needed a 1-minute, 30-second segment.
They needed 1.5-minute elements because of commercials. If you can't just put 2 commercials back to back. I mean, if you're running out of overtime, I'm saying. So if you put here a 1.5-minute element, show element, well, you can put in another commercial, an extra commercial. So they only had Bullwinkle's Mr. Know-It-All. And that was a 1:30 element, and they wanted another one, so Chet and I got together and we decided that what we would do is come up with a character who did all the lies in the world, the biggest lies ever told in the whole world. We went to the library and got those books, and we created a C. Aubrey Smith character. He'd just open up a globe and point there and say, "There I was. I saved the entire Indian tribe of the nation." You know, here I was. The football game was about to be lost. I came in.
Great.
The Hunter was voiced by Kenny Delmar, and it was actually based on a character Kenny Delmar used to do on Fred Allen's radio show. And he did a character called Senator Claghorn, which Mel Blanc did later as Foghorn Leghorn. It's like, I say, that's a joke, son, things like that. And so when it came time to do The Hunter, Buck Biggers was saying, we should get a voice like Kenny Delmar. And Tread Covington, who was casting the voices for the series, said, I think Kenny Delmar still exists. And at the time he did, and he wasn't working. They called him up, he was listed in the phone book, and they hired him to be the Hunter.
Many times on Allen's Alley, seeing that joke son routine and loved it, and always felt like it ought to go somewhere. He did great things with it, you know, that business about, I never drink on anything but Dixie cups, you know. And Kenny Delmar just kept doing it, and then he did it in Hollywood, and he made a couple of movies. And I always wanted to use it in a series.
Well, relax, son. The Hunter's on the job.
Recording sessions for the Underdog show were done in New York, and they were supervised by Ben Stern, who is Howard Stern's father, and Tread Covington, who handled all the business side of Total Television Productions.
Tread Covington, nice man, Southerner, Kentucky, something like that. Very nice man. And we all got along very well. We would go into the studio, put down our stuff. We never met Norma, the girl who played Pure Polly. We never met her. She did her stuff in L.A. And then we'd put down our lines, and they'd ship it all to the artist in Mexico.
We just got a recorder, you know, an LP, and that's how we hear. And many times we didn't know what they were saying because not all the animators in Mexico knew English. We didn't have many animators from states helping us. They just throw the work and they thought that we can do it. So we never have any help in the long run from the American animators.
TV was had just come into its own in terms of being something. And there was a transition from radio to TV. It was all everyone was kind of confused. So I think that was kind of a nice opportunity they had to pick up work.
The artwork on Total Television had basically an overall style, and this was thanks to Joe Harris, who was the character designer. At one point, he said he designed probably about 65 different characters for Total Television over the company's existence. After Joe Harris did his character designs, then they were sent out to an animation studio, and that studio was called Gamma Productions, and they were based in Mexico City. And one of the animators that worked there was Roman Arambula.
The word animator comes from the Latin anima, which means soul. So an artist that gives soul to his drawings they make them alive. So an animator should be able to feel the character he's drawing, the emotions. You know, if you're drawing a chicken, you should feel like a chicken. And if you're drawing a superhero, you feel like a superhero. So an animator is mainly an actor with a pencil. Animation is mainly a team effort. Nobody can claim that is the inventor or the designer of something. You know, even Mickey Mouse. It's been done for so many different talents, you know, that it's very difficult to say that one particular person invented the character.
Buck Biggers wrote the Underdog theme song, and he's thrilled and delighted these days that it's such a memorable song.
Underdog, 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 underdog.
There's a member of my family who says that the only reason I ever created Total Television Productions and started this whole thing was so that I could get my music on the air. And it could be true. I do love composing, and I've been doing it most of my life. And these themes were a great opportunity. The Underdog theme, which is the one people know best, for years, I loved the chords on King Kong. Boom, 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 boom. And never was able to do anything with them. And suddenly, we had Underdog, and I needed a theme, and I just suddenly said, boom, boom, but in this world the headlines read of those who... and had it, and I sat down to that piano, and I wrote that song in 1 hour.
The Underdog show came to an end after 3 seasons because the ad agency they were working with just basically said, that's enough, we have enough.
That's a matter of opinion.
They wanted to do more Underdog episodes, and after a time, they almost got close in the 80s of doing more episodes, but it never happened, and Total Television basically closed its doors at the end of the 1960s.
Oh, where has he gone?
That period, when Chet and I created cartoon series, was one of the most marvelous periods of my life because I so enjoyed what I was doing. But secondly, I've had a whole other period of extra rewards from people who saw the shows and tell me how wonderful they were, what a kick they got out of them, or how it helped them. As much as I may be appreciated for having some small part in what happened, I appreciate the opportunity it gave me.
Underdog show holds a place in a lot of kids' hearts who were born in the 1960s because it was a cartoon, it was on Saturday morning, it had satire, it had humor, it was all the things kids liked. It's proven to be just eternal because kids from the 70s, 80s, and beyond have enjoyed it as well.
There's no need to fear, Underdog is here.
My husband Bob, when he met me, he never watched Little House on the Prairie. He didn't know who I was. But he'd never missed an episode of Underdog, and my mother had to come down and give him an autograph from Sweet Polly Purebred because she totally outranked me on the celebrity scale.